We're live.
Yeah, I was just thinking the
Very.
same thing, was it really hot there? Is there anything we can do about that?
Say crack.
We may have panels, so we can follow it.
Says warm and cool.
That's all, those are the only options.
Yours is to be.
I guess.
Switch it.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's any ability to set the temperature. What about,
I don't see it.
what about that one green that does that flip up? See, can we set?
I can reach, let me reach out.
Okay.
See what's possible. But we're live.
You can put it to off. Is there an off?
Warm and cool is all I see.
No, I was thinking the same thing.
Okay.
I was thinking the same thing.
Like if you be the one that's switch it.
Oh, you can't do that. You can choose your, that might help. Do you want to, okay, this weekend?
Sunday was on.
Good.
Actually, not yet.
Okay, well, let's,
And then Sunday was.
oh, we are live.
We are live.
We are live. Okay, now we have temperatures making it's set a little bit. So this is Senate Education Committee in the afternoon of April 14th. We've got a few things we're looking at today. Everything from our Act 73 follow-up bill to H 931, the miscellaneous bill, and then a little bit of time on H 650, the technology products bill, then H 542, PCB bill, and I think, and that's that today. So we're gonna start with the St. James doing a walkthrough of the latest version of the Act 73 follow-up bill, which is draft 9.2, dated 4/13. Where's yours?
Thank you, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. We're gonna walk through the changes in draft 9.2. They're highlighted in yellow. There aren't a ton. So we will skip to the first change, which is on, we're going to be, just to orient us, we're going to be on page 17, section 5.
But even if we're looking at 9.1, should we leave those in yellow?
Yes,
Okay, good. Okay,
I have helpfully, yes,
okay.
everything that you have not reviewed yet is in
Okay.
yellow.
Good.
So we're in the transition to new supervisory unions report section. So now that we're oriented to where we are, we're going to move to page 18. Line 5, subsection C. On or before September 1st, 2027. This used to be, I believe, December 1st, 2026. The State Board of Education shall submit a written report to the House and Senate committees with the following. Adjustments to supervisory union boundaries.
So just to stop for a second here, it had said September 1 of 26. I think it's almost obvious that that's too soon for the board to make recommendations about workers of the whole gray areas, especially when we want to give the gray area time to be working on their own, coordinate with the board. And there's also no rush. So we're giving them, because everything else takes a couple of years, we're just giving them a little time to focus on it themselves and get to the point of the report a year later. Just in retrospect, it just seems almost, I'll say almost obvious that they need to get that done. So,
I've just, let's see. I've just, on line 8, subdivision 1 adjustments is highlighted just because it was capitalized and I needed drafting operations to look at it to make sure that it was in alignment with drafting conventions. And so we're going to jump to page 19, line 3, subdivision 2, same with the highlighting of school. That used to be lowercase, now it's highlighted to keep with the drafting convention changes I made throughout. And the substantive changes to the subdivision start on line 7. So remember, this is the report back from the State Board of Education. First part is adjustments to supervisory union boundaries, and the second part is school recommendations for school district mergers within the new supervisory union boundary recommendations submitted pursuant to subdivision C1 of this section, which is the gray area only, which shall result in a recommendation of a total of 10 school districts as practical with the boundaries of the supervisory union, within the boundaries of the supervisory unions listed in subdivision 1, which is again the gray area. And then the new language specifies that in making those recommendations, the state board needs to be taking into consideration any merger discussions already underway in the field. The secretary shall also work with these school districts to facilitate merger study committees or informal merger conversations prior to the board's recommendations pursuant to the subdivision.
So kind of mirrors what's happening in the other end of 12. Call it districts where the secretary was the agency works with districts that facilitates discussions about mergers. It's just making it be parallel. So there's the agency getting involved early and helping make that.
And then the next changes don't occur until section 12 on page 27. This is your appropriations and grants section. And so the study committee grant was amended from
You know what? Think of this as a placeholder. We're taking some testimony today and tomorrow about what that number should be. So it's fine. It's just a placeholder.
and so in draft 8.1, it was $10,000 and you bumped that up to 20,000 here.
That's actually what I first bit of testimony for this afternoon. One former superintendent.
And then on page 28 in subdivision 3, the merger support grant. We've removed some things here, so you can't see what we've removed. The previous draft 8.1, had merger support grants calculated in one of two ways. It was either what we have here, of this a grant in the amount of $40,000, although in the draft 8.1,
It's also a placeholder. So it's okay.
I appreciate that. I feel like I have an obligation to be clear on what the changes I made were. And so let's see, after about, okay. So draft 8.1 had merger support grants calculated one of two ways. It was either 10% of the base education amount or $300,000. This draft just makes it a merger support grant, the amount of $40,000. And then it clarifies, let's see, previous in draft 8.1, new school districts, I'm in subdivision B, new school districts formed pursuant to the recommendation of a study committee established pursuant to chapter 11, pursuant to section 6 of this act on or after July 1, 2026, shall be eligible for a grant under this subdivision 3. Draft 8.1 had some qualifiers for eligibility. So what subdivision B is saying is if you are a new school district that's formed pursuant to this act, you're automatically eligible for a grant, while draft 1.1 required an average daily membership of 3,000 students, at least 15 separate towns. And those were the two requirements. So those have been removed. And then there were no further changes to that section.
So this, we're gonna get some testimony in about the work that goes in before you get to a vote, and then the work that happens after a vote, and then what the amounts are, because those are so. Superintendent coming in.
Who's gonna brief us?
We've got one superintendent coming this afternoon, former superintendent, and then a couple of others for the next couple of years who've been through the process. And by the way, also to describe the process And then where the money is looked up for when and that kind of thing, because this is not a big jam. But we can get a big.
And then jumping to section 13 on page 29, transition facilitation study committee and merger support grant. These are all the appropriations. So section 12 is the grant programs. Section 13 are the accompanying appropriation. Subdivision or subsection A is the appropriation for SU transition facilitation grants. And that went from $2,750,000 to $3 million.
That, by the way, that number is 12 students times 250.
And then in subsection B,
So notionally 12 gray area.
Yeah. No, 12.
Well, the other,
Yeah, but we're not, because they have to 250 to have them do the one together.
and then subsection B is the appropriation for merger support grants. And that went from $50,000 to $200,000. I'm sorry, that went from $50,000 to $400,000 subsection, and that was study committee grants. Subsection C is the merger support grants, and that went from $600,000 to $200,000.
There in the first year, most of the work is going to be done prior to the vote. So, but again, placeholder numbers, circling placeholders. So here's some testimony.
Keeping on page 30, section 14 is only highlighted because it used to be section 15 because section 14 in draft 8.1 has been removed. And that was the change to section 4001 subdivision 16 in title 16, which changed the base amount of the foundation formula. That language no longer appears in this draft. And then there was some, I think along our journey to get to draft 9.2, there was some legacy language from previous drafts that I had not updated to account for the policy changes you had made in this bill. And so subdivision, I'm in the last, on page 31, the last substantive section, which is the amendments to the effective dates for Act 73. Subdivision 1 and subsection F for the effective dates of section 27 of Act 73 had been struck, and that should not have been struck. So I have removed the strike through. And then in subsection G, the entire subsection had been repealed, but we actually want to keep those the references to section 823B and C. And so we've struck the contingencies and we've moved the effective date to July 1, 2029 to be consistent with the rest of the foundation formula implementation. And then previously the effective date section had some different effective dates because you have the base taking effect at the same time as the foundation formula. You no longer have that change. So the whole, right now, this whole draft would take effect on July 1, 2026.
So by the way, so I just said that because remember we had the discussion with Julia and Ezra here. We're trying to figure out what made sense to raise. I think the consensus was that we should just leave it where it is. Send. I experimented with putting in a higher base on the theory that there would be a cliff, and then as you know, that kind of got dispelled by Julia and Ezra that maybe that's not quite. So the back, so it's back to where it was.
slow guy in the room. Which number?
The base remains now 50-53.
You're talking about
Foundation for two. Yes, sorry, didn't use the right term.
Yeah, no, you said, yeah, whatever you said about this.
So we actually experimented,
Yeah.
tested the notion of a higher base. And after listening to Julie and Ezra, I think the consensus was we should just look at the
Thanks. Yeah, there's
base foundation for yeah.
So just to confirm, we're not doing anything in this bill that affects the class size minimum section of Act 73, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that we want to consider? Because I know we've gotten considerable testimony on it, and I'm not
Yeah.
proposing anything right now, but just want to bring it back up.
Timing's good for that question because it is a question. So it's in the miscellaneous bill. And one question for us might be what we want to move it over here. Depending on what we decide to. Because it's actually So, so any questions about this? Yeah,
I think you've already lined it up, but understanding all these individual values for essentially governance group, funding, creed, merger, all that. Understanding what the money really means, like what they know or what they've experienced would be very helpful.
Okay.
So it sounds like you teed that up.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just trying to shoot.
yeah, but that's exactly right. That's, so, we have a new superintendent discussion. And get the work. So I think the way this happened, we have our first one of our superintendent and through the merger process. Actually talk about how it works. What it takes. She's, yeah. Okay. Anything
If,
else?
just a question, going back to Senator Hasheen's point about lot size minimums. The miscellaneous bill has a lot of miscellaneous items as so would be imagined, but the class size does seem like maybe it is more appropriate to put it in bigger because it's directly related as opposed to being mixed in with something not necessarily critical.
I
Well, your visibility
to think that probably. Yeah. So why don't, if people want to, are ready to, we could switch over to the miscellaneous bill. We'll have a new miscellaneous bill. Number 9.1. Oh, no, we don't have a new. What do we?
We have, it should be towards the top.
It's a one page.
Oh, so one page of the council.
One, two.
Yes. Yeah, that one's not there. I'm curious.
There it is. Okay. So here, this is,
Awesome.
this is, so as we talked about this the other day, as Senator Hasheen just noted, Senator, I think if actually, the one sheet is all you need.
Okay, just,
You're fine.
I gotta organize.
Yeah.
Yes, that's pretty good violence is
Yeah. About time somebody called me on.
No, it came over from, remember the discussion, remember the issue got raised by the state board with us early in the session. The House version moved it because of that confusion, moved it to one of two ways. The simple way was July 1 of 27. The other way was that, what was it, all the contingencies had?
The state board had adopted rules.
Okay, state board, okay. So for shorthand, we could say July 1, 27. And what we talked about after we heard some testimony the other day was pushing it back so it doesn't take effect until the foundational formula actually goes into effect. And so the way, I'll let you walk through it, but the way this is attempting to do is to say that once all the contingencies have been met and the foundation formula goes into effect, does the process, 3-year clock start ticking. So it is likely to start ticking a few years from now rather than now. So with that,
Thank you, Beth St. James, offered the Legislative Council. So you all have possession of H 931, which is the miscellaneous education bill. But so far, we've only made one change to it. So I have drafted that as an instance of amendment. Unless you are going to be making major changes to the bill in every section, I am going to encourage you to use instances because it makes it so much more clear where your committee is making changes to the work that the House did. So this is an instance of amendment to section 13 of H 931 as passed by the House, which in and of itself was an amendment to Act 73, Section 7. The House added subsection B, that is just what your chair described. It essentially started the clock ticking on the secretary being able to hold schools accountable to the class size minimums. You can see on page 8 that language. Until the state board adopts updates to the education quality standards rule series to reflect the addition of class size minimums, or July 1, 2027, whichever date comes first. You'll see that on line 7, we're striking out those words. So by striking out those words, you're gonna, on line 11, insert in lieu thereof. There's an in missing on line 11. The following language: all contingencies contained in 2025 Acts and Resolves number 73, section 70F, subsection F, as amended, that's the effective date section for the foundation formula, that are required for the foundation formula to become effective have been met, and the foundation formula is effective. So it would read, school's failure to comply with the class size minimum requirements contained in 16 VSA section 165 subdivision A9 shall not count towards the 3 consecutive school years of non-compliance that enables the secretary to recommend action to the state board until all contingencies contained in 2025 Acts and Resolves number 73, section 70, subsection F, as amended, are required for the foundation formula to become effective have been met, and the foundation formula is effective.
Yes.
So maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like the phrase "and the foundation formula is effective" is very subjective. What if some people think it's effective and other people don't think it's effective? How does this work?
Theoretically, I should only be drafting contingencies for the you all where there is a subjective determination of whether the contingency has been met. And therefore, it would be easy to tell whether the contingency has been met and whether any effective dates based on that contingency are effective. I will leave it up to you all. I think that's a policy question of whether the contingencies in Act 73 are clear enough for there to be no debate over. But you have what you have to work with. What I have been asked is to draft language that makes the clock start ticking on compliance with education with class size minimums contingent on the foundation formula taking effect, which in and of itself is contingent on the contingencies in Act 73. So I hear you, but that is what we have to work with.
Thank you.
You working on 931.
Yes.
We're working on the strings.
You're talking about rolling this into
Well, that's come up, yeah, that's to roll it into, take it out of the miscellaneous bills, strike that section to the miscellaneous bill. Yes,
So maybe this is a question for you, or that, but when it comes down to it, it'll be the state board that determines what a class is, and whether it's, whether it's a grade, whether it's a classroom, whether a para-educator counts towards that. They'll be the ones determining that.
I remember that I do.
So right now, the Act 73, as passed last year and enacted last year, requires the state board to update the education quality rule series to reflect the statutory change, period. H 955, as it is traveling in the House today, does provide definitions for some key terms, including class, including school, etc. So it depends on what you all pass this year. On whether there will be any further clarity to the state board
Did you say that the House bill contains of definitions?
in 955,
And
which is the big ed bill, yes.
thank you.
And just so people know that, we're doing a walkthrough of that bill on Friday. We won't quite have it, but it'll be, and we'll have going through second reading on Thursday,
Mhm.
third reading on Friday, so we're gonna go walk through. Some risk, I suppose, there's a last minute or amendment, but.
Can't go this. Yeah, the rumor is there's gonna be quite a few.
They tend to hit on second,
Mhm.
they tend to hit second, reading, but we'll see.
When do they start floor on Friday?
Friday, the House.
Nine
starts-
thirty. 9:30, so we'll probably even have the most of the full bill, but.
Looks like it's sense. So do we, so we heard, remember the testimony we heard, which was, in some ways, the testimony was, if it was up to us, we probably just wouldn't have less privilege. But if they're gonna stay, having them start about, effectively about 3 years later, the clock start ticking, would take some pressure, all the pressure off us, some of the pressure we would give them. Well, that was somebody testimony, I think. So we have a good choice. The choice that we're testing out here is just pushing the clock, the start of the 3-year clock ticking out until the foundation for the actual takes effect. So that's what's in front of us.
I think we should be limiting our asks of these newly formed entities or our schools as they are right now. I think we should be limiting our asks as much as possible. I feel pretty good about limiting them to working with a foundation formula. And until then, a spending penalty, and having a district size that we hear is the right district size. There just simply isn't a body of research that should indicate to us that we know best when small is too small for class size. That's not necessarily going to save us money.
Yeah.
So I advocate we're seeing this all over the place when you say we're just extending the deadline. That doesn't make anybody's life easier.
Which is a sort of common sense.
That was it. But I just don't like the idea of deadline extensions as a way to solve the problem. Maybe the House will reintroduce that if we move away from class sizes, but I see no value to the class size piece if we're already asking for district size.
So what are you saying?
The first option,
What-
whichever was the option of just not having a class size minimum for right now. It could be reintroduced any year people want to reintroduce it, but it's another input right now that's just causing confusion.
I agree with that.
So if it were up to you two, you're saying you just get rid of class size.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I'm a project guy, right? That's how I made my living. And timeline was always very, very important. So all the muscle movements got plotted on when we're deciding to do this or do that and what influences this and what influences that. So that in one shot, you can see from today to whatever, 4 years out, 5 years out, and all the different decision points and all the things that have to correlate together to lead to some successful conclusion. And if it didn't, we altered it, kept altering it, dynamic, very dynamic. And I submit that we need, it's just me, a visual timeline through this whole thing, all these transformations to lead to theoretically better position than we are now, and when and where they happen and why they happen. That would be helpful. If you want, I can do like a first pass with some project software and just,
It may have been done.
There is a timeline for Act 73 and there is a timeline that will come with H 955.
okay, good. Can, who did that? Who's the,
Ledge Council,
someone in your office?
multiple people in my office. Can I ask, do you want a timeline so you can see how we're asking a lot of districts, like, and it's all getting confusing, like, cause if we're so confused, we need a timeline. That's the
No,
point.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't,
Mhm.
watching and the folks who are getting a third person, et cetera, they can't track what the whole process is.
So by the way, just to set this up, when Beth comes in on Friday to walk through the House bill, we're doing it with the expectation that we might not finish. Because it might take a while, so we're gonna
Finish
start.
the walkthrough.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's gonna be, so the reason I said that is that what we might want to start with on Friday with that is a walkthrough of the existing timeline, the Act 73 timeline as a starting point, and then move to the bill. So we recognize we're not going to the bill anyway. Do that first, then.
Can I submit that might be helpful to get the Act 73 timeline again?
That's what we're talking about.
Just pass it on, pass it on ahead of time. So by the time we see you on Friday and we're talking about a bill that's coming through the House, that we can see what their timeline is and start understanding where they made significant changes. Access.
I will send a draft or the link to the document.
Yeah, so why don't we sort of switch our thinking to doing that and start with on Friday, then walk through the timeline, then switch to the House bill. Then work out their timeline afterwards. We get just, we'll get as far as we get, then pick it up the following week. We're getting a little jump on it. It's what we do on Friday.
I didn't know if other people had opinion on the class size.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to see where it hits.
Mhm.
Because frankly, we know what the class is all right now. We know what the class size is right now. We know that we have that, and I'm not submitting that we need 3 years or we don't need 3 years to then have it take effect. But I'd like to kind of see the sequence of decision points and,
I think that one was 2027.
Class size minimums take effect in statute on July 1, 2026. They rely on current law, and then some amendments made in Act 73 for the timeline to get to the point where there would be any actions taken against a school. And so, as of July 1, 2026, it would be that the clock starts ticking on July 1, 2026, because they have become effective. And this would be you making no further changes to the law. Then, if over a period of 3 consecutive school years, there is non-compliance and it is not for one of the reasons specified, or they don't have a compliance plan ready to go, it's just taken them a while to get there, then those 3 consecutive school years enable the secretary to recommend action to the state board. That's a may, not a shall. And it also requires the state board or the secretary after those 3 years of non-compliance to provide an additional 2 years of assistance, if you will, hoping to get them in compliance before they could recommend that action to the state board. So depending on whether or not the secretary used her discretion, we're talking at least 5 years before there could be action taken against a school based on class size minimums solely. The timelines that we have for Act 73 and for H 955, because these bills are so big, don't contain that level of detail for every policy choice, right? It's effective dates and it's the larger pieces like class size minimums become effective. The timeline doesn't include, and then 3 years later, etc. So it may not be that every policy decision you'd like to see interpreted on the timeline is represented there, but I can do my best to speak to it as we look at the timeline.
I'm game just to see what you got. Could be mature enough to help us support the decision.
So it sounds like what we do is pick up this discussion on Friday. I mean, you don't hear about it.
Well, I think what I think we should make sure we're all on the same page about is that what they said was these things just continuing to hang out there may be causing them to make conflicting decisions than what they would do if they were just given a couple of inputs to work with in a time when frankly we just want them to be educating kids in a different time. I'd say like pushing things out is we can always return to things, but pushing them out says like we still agree that this should be hanging out there. And I don't agree it should be hanging out there.
So you saying you don't think class sizes should be hanging out? Just give it.
No, we have not seen, I have looked through a lot of research and evidence and there's nothing to say this is the right class size. It can be very dependent on your community. Most people will say, when we see too small, but we're seeing classes right now that have 1 to 5 AP kids or whatever it is. And that's still valuable. That's still Vermont size.
But that brings back the affordable to valuable.
But if we're giving them a foundation formula and a district size,
But, and again, I'm not fully, if they can afford it.
we're
under the
trusting them to do the
foundation
best
for
we
it,
can.
It's like,
Can you read us the contingencies? Figure that was.
For the foundation formula?
Yeah. Because we have a couple minutes, we can do it on Friday, but. I'm sorry, just let you, not for the financial, the contingencies for that the secretary can consider, or how class sizes work.
Oh, sure. Let me pull up the statute.
Because I know like this discussion that we're just having now, because I think some types of classes are exempt.
Correct.
So,
Including AP classes.
okay,
That was an example.
I know, but it's still
And CTE is exempt?
Yes.
Okay.
good examples. One combined class for school, I think, if I recall correctly.
See, I don't know
Yeah.
this stuff all like,
No,
it's like, why?
Okay, so we're in section 165, which is the Education Quality Standards Statute. When we talk about EQS or education quality standards, we are most often thinking about the state board rules, but the state board rules only exist because you have the statute. And there are specifics in the statute itself. So you have to think about both of them to have a total picture of what Vermont's education quality standards entail. So we're in subsection A. In order to carry out Vermont's policy, etc., schools shall meet the following education quality standards. And Act 73 added subdivision 9. That does not take effect until July 1, 2026. So the school complies with the average class size minimum standards, provided, however, that when class size minimums apply to content areas, an individual class may be smaller than the minimum average. As used in the subdivision, content area means a group of courses within a specific licensing endorsement area. And then subdivision A lists the class size standards for the grade bands. It specifies that multi-age classrooms for grades K through 8 shall be limited to 2 grade levels per classroom. And then the following types of classes or courses are exempt from class size minimum: pre-K, kindergarten, CTE, flexible pathways, terminal courses, advanced placement courses, courses that require specialized equipment, and driver's education classes. And then also small group services for the purposes of providing special education, supplemental or targeted academic intervention, or English learner instruction shall also be excluded from class size minimums.
Remind us what a couple of those are.
I am not an education expert.
Capstone.
So my understanding is that advanced placement is an actual like regulated course, right, through the college exam board. Anyway, terminal courses is meant to capture those advanced courses that are not AP courses, but would be like you've reached the highest level you could go. So like Spanish 5, if there were, whatever that might be, but it's not an AP course. that term is not defined, so it doesn't necessarily matter what I think. So, and then we've got some language here that says class sizes should not exceed what's already spelled out elsewhere in the law regarding maximum occupancy limits. Schools can ask for a waiver due to geographic isolation, or they've developed an implementation plan to meet those standards. They need some time to get going. And then state board action. So if the secretary determines that a school is not meeting class size minimums over the course of 3 consecutive school years, the secretary may recommend to the state board one or more of the actions listed in subsection B, which is the actions that the state board can take for non-compliance with all education quality standards. And then the state board would be required to follow the procedures in subsection C. So subsection B here is if the school fails to meet standards or make sufficient progress. Oh, actually, I should scroll up. So annually, the secretary is required to determine whether students in each Vermont public school are provided educational opportunities substantially equal to those provided in other schools. If the secretary determines that a school is not meeting EQS standards listed in subsection A of this section, which includes class size minimums, or that the school is making insufficient progress in improving student performance, the secretary shall describe in writing the actions that a district must take in order to meet those standards and shall provide technical assistance. If the school fails to meet the standards within 2 years of that determination, the secretary has to make a recommendation to the state board. So you've got 3 consecutive years, and then it's discretionary whether the secretary even does anything after those 3 years. And then if the secretary does make recommendations, the law requires 2 years of technical assistance and then a recommendation to the state board. And then there are 5 recommendations that may be made, including continuing to provide technical assistance for 1 more cycle, adjusting SU boundaries, assuming administrative control of the school, closing a school, or ordering consolidation.
So, or on Friday. Okay, good, that was very helpful. I think we're good.
Any changes to either the Act 73 continuation bill or what we've talked about here today?
Well, here's one thought, maybe we don't Friday on this one, but one thought is what direction we go. Decide we're gonna look to the so the draft 9.2 versus 9.3.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You're gonna do what?
We do, whether it's push the date out or eliminate whatever, what does we do it in, what would be 9.3?
So you're referring to class size minimums. So you'd like to add,
Take them out miscellaneous.
okay. Can I point something out?
Yeah.
So the miscellaneous, the amendment we are looking at for the miscellaneous ed bill ties the clock ticking to the contingencies for the foundation formula. But your draft 9.2 removes all the contingencies and just sets a date certain for the foundation formula to get back. So we couldn't have both in the same draft.
Okay, let's hang on then and think about that. So the way 9.2 is right now, talk about that again. Moving.
The way I've been calling it your governance modernization language based on your original proposal. That language has traveled since whenever you made that policy decision. I can't remember. It may have even been the first draft. That all of the contingencies are removed for the foundation formula, and the foundation formula just takes effect on July 1, 2029, period. So you could just say the clock doesn't start ticking until July 1, 2029. You just having this language travel in either vehicle coming out of this committee would potentially pose a problem, but if you're putting it in the same vehicle, it certainly would be something we would want to rectify.
Reconcile.
Reconcile, yes.
So let's do.
Yep.
Okay. So more on Friday.
Okay.
I think that's where we're headed. We'll just have to figure out how.
Okay. Then I won't have a new draft for you on Friday. Unless we talk in the interim. Okay. And do you have me in before then?
You might,
I think you do.
I'll do have you for an hour to work.
we don't need anything, right? Good. Oh, do we have other of our other live bills? That is on,
Each 9:30.
what's that?
Chronic absenteeism.
Massachusetts. That one. Let's. That's,
Or 1:30.
uh,
Oh, it's just a witness district.
Yeah, I mean, from 1:45 to 3 tomorrow.
let's analyze at the end of the day where we are, like now.
Okay. I have no change. I have not been requested to draft any changes, but I'm happy to come and do markups with you.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether we'll be ready for that.
Got
That
it.
might even be what we were thinking. Why don't we book it that way for tomorrow as more of a one. What do we have testimony on? We have some tomorrow. We have more on Thursday, don't we?
Yes.
But we want to get ahead of ourselves. We'll talk to you at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
thanks.
I'll see you on Friday.
Maybe, yeah. Nothing else. If we have yeah, we can, go on live until 2:15.
Our witness is here, correct?
Okay. I never know whether we should start early or not, it's kind of leading, but let's start. People are good to go. Thanks, Matt.
Welcome.
If we're good to go, so we'll switch it tonight to H650 and start taking testimony of it, education technology this. Somebody hasn't, I think, should have seen your file to that 650.
Oh, I didn't read for instance.
Okay, is that point? Okay. Anybody who needs it. But you're just gonna do it online. It's gonna go. Many cases,
It's not something we have.
we had it passed out last week. They haven't moved the stage. So good.
Oh, I've been looking at it.
Yeah.
H650, yeah. Who's our drafter?
So what?
Who's the drafter for 650?
It's my one.
Is it Rand? It's Rand? Okay,
It's Rand.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go with 650 is. It's got the couple of key areas.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, with that, our first witness is Abigail Wilson.
Here. Slow down. Slow down. All right.
Abigail Wilson.
Good
Director of
afternoon, y'all.
State Policy Software Information Association. So you're on.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Bongartz and members of the committee, SIIA represents nearly 400 companies delivering educational technology to K-12 schools nationwide, including Vermont. We share the legislature's concerns about children's well-being. That shared concern is precisely why precision matters and why H650, as currently drafted, misses the mark. The concern driving this legislation is legitimate. Parents and educators are right to ask hard questions about technology in the classrooms. But the correct question is not how much screen time students are getting, but it is what they are doing on those screens, who governs it, and what evidence shows the outcomes. That distinction matters enormously because the technology these bills target and the technology that genuinely concerns most parents are not the same thing. What disappears under blanket device restrictions is specific. The reading assessment that flags a struggling second grader in time to intervene. The adaptive platforms that gives a student with disability the access the law requires. The only high-quality instructional content available to students in Vermont's most under-resourced communities. In a roundtable convened by New America's Teaching, Learning, and Tech program, students recognized the risk of technology, including distraction, AI overuse, and less critical thinking, but distinguished these risks from complete bans. One participant noted that decision makers may overlook technology's support for learning when parental concerns are primarily centered around their children's use of consumer technology outside of the classroom. This call is not for removal, but thoughtful integration based on research and teacher training. The evidence for institutional educational technology is currently rigorous. RAND found blended learning models can double typical annual learning gains. SRI International documented 75% more learning from digital feedback tools while closing achievement gaps for struggling students. 68% of educators report saving 5 hours a week with EdTech, time that is reinvested directly into students. And the nations that consistently outperform the United States, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Estonia, are not low technology education systems. High performance and thoughtful technology integrations go hand in hand. Institutional EdTech is not an unregulated Wild West. Vendors serving Vermont schools already operate under a variety of federal laws, including FERPA, COPPA, ESSA, SIPA, IDEA, and the ADA. It's a rigorous framework covering data privacy, content filtering, evidence of effectiveness, and accessibility. Critically, EdTech purchased with federal dollars must meet ESSA's evidence of effectiveness framework. Consumer technology faces no such requirements. School-managed devices also operate within a supervised environment. For example, under SIPA, schools are required to filter content and block harmful material. H650's certification layer duplicates this existing accountability without adding any meaningful student protection, imposing compliance costs that risk driving smaller providers out of Vermont and leaving districts with fewer yet more expensive options. Institutional EdTech is a purpose-built for formal learning environments. It's anchored in pedagogy, governed by school contracts, and prohibited from using student data for commercial marketing. Consumer technology, such as social media platforms, streaming, and general purpose apps, carry none of these requirements. By defining educational tech product to cover any software that may collect, process, or transmit student data, H650 applies the same regulatory regime to ESSA-compliant adaptive reading platform as to a consumer app with no pedagogical governance whatsoever. Effective legislation should reflect that distinction, not erase it. H650's restrictions do not fall equally. Students with disabilities depend on EdTech as legally required accommodations under IDEA and the ADA. Restricting certified tools directly compromises the access to the curriculum. Students in rural and lower income Vermont communities frequently rely on EdTech as the only access to high quality instructional content. The students most affected by the imprecise restrictions are often the very students these policies seek to protect. SIA agrees with the problem that the bill is attempting to solve. But the answer to the concerns about the technology in classrooms is not the blanket prohibition. It is educator-governed, evidence-required, outcomes-accountable framework that the institutional EdTech already operates under. We strongly urge the committee to adopt a study-first approach modeled on Virginia's SB 568, directing the Agency of Education to develop evidence-based model policy in consultation with educators, researchers, disability advocates, and EdTech providers. This would give Vermont the precision it needs, protecting students from genuine harms without eliminating the tools its schools and most vulnerable students depend on day to day. We welcome the opportunity to work with the committee and are available to provide additional information at your request. Thank you.
Thank you. Admittedly, I'm still learning all the nuances of this bill. It just came to us recently. I'm not understanding how there's necessarily a blanket prohibition. I'm looking at page 3, specifically lines 15 and 16, where the AOE would be able, would have a role in creating a list of educational and technology products that could be used across the state. And maybe I'm still trying to figure out the different parts of this bill, but where are you seeing that there's a blanket prohibition?
So I think their concern is not necessarily a blanket prohibition, but the way the registration is that it could and would prohibit certain educational technology and create this additional layer that it's unnecessary given the additional federal protections that are already in place. So it would initially create a prohibition until an educational provider would go through the process with the state to become registered. That's the way that we are reading the legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So I don't know who this came from, but it's like a list of all of the different types of things that might be considered ed tech. And it does, it, as you said, it includes some things that could be considered social media already or are more tailored towards kids. I'm looking at other states and I wonder if you have any comment, for example, on Utah. It's my understanding that they just set specific parameters around what was acceptable, which really can vary by age. So I guess, you know, what I'd say out loud is I think the definition of what we're trying to capture in what constitutes ed tech could use some work. But I'm not really even as passionate about that part as I would be trying to make sure that we look at some of our past work, like the kids code and trying to get a lot of screens out of schools, which we just passed last year, and really prohibit the use of ed tech for kids under 8 and make sure that no ed tech has paid advertising or pop-up advertising on it. How does your group and the folks you represent feel about some of those provisions advancing in various states?
First, we appreciate the question. And when it specifically comes to Utah, we can follow up with specific information. We follow a lot of bills and I can't recall the specifics off the top of my head, but I appreciate
I think you touched on signed age bands and what is allowed.
Yeah, so we were following it. I just don't have the exact specifics and I want to give any incorrect information. When it comes to specific ages and what's included, I think it very much we don't want to create strong prohibitions. There are cases for under 8, let's say, that's about a second grader, where there may be a need. A learn to read software does provide and can provide benefits. You know, do we want
what kind of software? Sorry.
Learn to read?
A learn to read software. Yeah, I use
Yes.
it. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I use
Yeah,
that
so
one.
my daughter's 10 months. I completely understand. I'm very, many moons ago, I won't tell you how many, learned how to read on Learn to Read software. So there are uses, but it's depend on the effectiveness. And I do think there's a role and a place for making sure that we are using software that does have that study behind it. We shouldn't just blatantly throw technology into the classroom without some of that pedagogical study behind it to ensure that it works. I don't think we don't want to blatantly put in those bans. I think there are also some tools that teachers use that may not directly fall under ed tech. For example, a first grade teacher may show a PowerPoint to go through words or go through the days of the week, showing the weather. There may be ways that a teacher is using new technology or technology in the classroom where it's educator led. But it would still technically be a screen, but it is still useful to the students.
I mean, I think that probably would have much more to do with the definition of what we're talking about when we talk about classroom learning versus like a teaching, I mean, I don't think,
Cool.
so I do think the definite, if you have any thoughts on definitionally what we're talking about here, that's helpful.
We would be happy to follow up with that.
But yeah, I mean, we have a cell phone ban in schools for a reason. You didn't really address the pop-up advertising.
Yeah, so sorry, yes, I appreciate you following up with that. On educational, you're not allowed to use student data for commercial purposes. I think I can follow up about specifics about how student data is used, but as far as I understand at this moment, I don't believe our members who specifically provide ed tech services are doing that, but I can follow up about that.
Think what? So there would be no advertising on any of the.
I would have to follow up on specifics, but I know that student data cannot be used for commercial
Would
advertising.
probably wouldn't be a huge issue then to your members if we banned any form of advertising on.
I would have to follow up specifically, but off the top of my head, I don't think that would be the crux of the issue.
Well, I just to like, maybe I feel the need to defend myself. I think I used reading software growing up when I was a child. I do it with my 3-year-old daughter, just turned 3 yesterday. But it's just like a book. It's a best practice at that age to do it with a parent or one-on-one with, a teacher or an adult. So I just still can't imagine it being good for our kids in 1st or 2nd grade to en masse in a classroom setting, just be using devices for learning to read. I don't even like having the tablet in the legislature. I gave it back.
Senator O'Shea.
So maybe,
No.
Let's look at the laptop.
Computer, laptop, computer, I'm like, you think,
so, and I understand you may not know the answer to this question, but does Facebook/Meta, do they have educational products that are used in schools?
I believe Meta has a few programs, but they are used in higher levels, so 9 through 12 are college-based, but I would have to follow up specifically about those programs, but I think it's a very small portion of their business profile.
And do any of those programs collect data on the students?
That I do not have an answer for you at this moment, but I can follow up.
And so same question for Google and Amazon. Do you know if they have similar products?
So all of our members have, so Google and Amazon, they do participate in different programs. Amazon, for example, provides digital reading programs, particularly to underserved communities. My niece, for example, goes to a rural school that doesn't have a library with physical books. They do have to follow, as I mentioned, all the federal guidelines in regards to student privacy. Vermont, as previously mentioned, does have the Kids Code, so any state privacy laws they would also have to abide by. Any additional regulations, I would have to do additional research and can report back to the committee.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. We may have you back. And we'll look-
Absolutely, I would appreciate the
some of that.
opportunity.
We'll
I will
look for some
follow
of
up.
that. We'll look for some of those answers from you in one.
Absolutely,
Okay, thank you. So,
thank you.
Josh Bloomberg. Keep moving, I'm realizing. Get through this by 3. Which one?
and part of the,
Oh, it's slide forward.
Actually, you might be the other way.
Cool.
These chairs.
Oh, so you two are together, okay.
Yeah.
That takes time pressure off, okay.
agency that.
So for the record, both of you.
One second.
Sure. I'm Dr. Erin Davis, Chief Academic Officer at the Agency of Education.
Josh Blumberg. I'm the Educational Technology Program Manager at the Agency of Education.
Okay.
So I'm gonna kind of take people through the testimony because it kind of came in last minute and we're gonna get to the questions. So thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on page 650. The Agency of Education shares the goals at the heart of this bill, protecting student data privacy and ensuring that educational technology used in Vermont schools is high quality and well chosen. The agency appreciates the House's movement toward a study and report structure in the version that has come to the Senate. H650 reaches towards two distinct goals: student data privacy and educational technology effectiveness. Combining them into a single mechanism serves neither well. These goals require different solutions, and Vermont is well positioned to act on both. The agency proposes a two-track approach. Enact the privacy track now, where the infrastructure already exists and needs only to be made universal, and redirect the bill's report requirements to study curriculum coordination related to the effectiveness of educational technology. Data privacy is a legal and contractual matter with established standards and compliance frameworks. Educational technology effectiveness is a question of curricular coordination, instructional context, and implementation quality. Each deserves a serious response. Either is served by a single certification mechanism that treats them as the same problem. Vermont has a robust and cost-effective student data privacy infrastructure since 2018, anchored by the Vermont Student Data Privacy Alliance and the National Data Privacy Agreement. The agency funds the Vermont Student Data Privacy Alliance membership for all Vermont school districts at no cost to districts. Vermont school districts so there's a database in that, and that database currently has active data privacy agreements covering 923 unique educational technology products, representing 2,438 individual district vendor agreements across 44 supervisory unions and districts. Through participation in the National Standard Data Privacy Consortium and with the partnership of the Education Collaborative, Vermont benefits from legal expertise and vendor leverage that no state-specific certification system could replicate. The infrastructure works. The gap is that participation is not yet universal, and not every district has the legal and administrative capacity to manage data privacy agreements well. The most effective steps the legislature can take on student data privacy are to close those two gaps directly. Require all Vermont supervisory unions and districts to participate in the Vermont Student Data Privacy Alliance, and to use the National Data Privacy Agreement process for educational technology vendors. This makes universal what is already funded and already working. Fund the Agency of Education to procure and provide statewide DPA implementation support for all districts. A useful funding benchmark is approximately $1 per student. That's what most districts are currently paying, which is sufficient to cover current costs for the entire state through an established multi-state collaborative. The legislation should fund the function rather than name a specific vendor, allowing the agency to procure through standard processes. Together, these two steps would give Vermont universal data privacy coverage through proven infrastructure used by 35 states at modest cost without building any new state mechanisms. This is the strongest action the legislature can take to act on the privacy concerns motivating H650. Separately, the effectiveness of educational technology cannot be evaluated in the abstract. How the tool is integrated into instruction, how teachers scaffold its use, how it aligns with the curriculum, and how it serves diverse learners is integral to whether it is effective. Poor implementation of a good tool produces poor results. This is why a state certification mechanism focused on product attributes is the wrong instrument. It would create the appearance of quality assurance while doing little to support the implementation work where outcomes are determined. The right framing is curriculum coordination. Educational technology should be selected and used as part of a coherent instructional program, the same way the agency is approaching high-quality instructional materials. In this framing, the state's role is to give districts visibility into what their peers are using, support shared professional learning, and over time build evidence about what is working in Vermont classrooms. The decisions remain with the districts within the context of state standards, but the information available to support those decisions becomes meaningfully better. The agency already collects data on educational technology in use across Vermont schools through 2 annual surveys: technology survey sent to district technology leaders, and a K-3 survey that captures literacy and math screeners with strong response rates. The agency also plans to add questions on AI platforms used with students to this year's survey cycle. Building on this existing foundation, the agency proposes to expand and improve these surveys with a focus on curriculum coordination in the areas most consequential for student outcomes. Local comprehensive assessment systems, including literacy and math readers. These questions will be redesigned and routed to district curriculum coordinators rather than IT leaders who are not the appropriate respondents for instructional questions. Computer adaptive learning platforms used in mathematics and English language arts. Math and ELA are priority subjects for improving student outcomes. And this aligns with the agency's HQIM, so high quality instruction material strategy. AI platforms used by students. So this is an emerging area where state level visibility supports the implementation of Vermont's AI guidance for education. The agency will publish annual results in a form that districts can use for peer comparison, professional learning coordination, and curriculum decision making. The agency is comfortable having this annual survey and reporting commitment reflected in legislation.
Yes,
One of the pieces of the bill that did concern me was with or without a contract. It said, so ed tech companies, and I do think we need to work on the definition so we're clear. And so we're not impinging on academic freedom, especially for older age categories. But it said, you have to register whether or not you have a contract with a district. Don't know how that's achievable. I don't know if you've given that thought, because I don't know what it means if you're a software without a contract in the state.
And so it's very hard to imagine that every worldwide ed tech vendor is going to come to Vermont, register, and then we would have the capacity to audit them for all these feature requests. Every single district has procedure with PURPA, right? You're violating PURPA if you don't have a DPA agreement with your vendor, and it has student data. So the difference, the way H650 lays out educational technology is it's student facing and it has student data. From our perspective, it doesn't matter if it's student facing in terms of data privacy, whether it has student data. So
right.
Your registrar system, your finance system is just as important to secure as what's sitting in front of a student in terms of their data privacy. And all of those require DPA, and almost all districts are using that DPA agreement system through the Vermont Student Data Privacy Alliance. What that means is we're playing a piggyback game. So New York, Colorado, Illinois, they are all negotiating, right? And Tech, who's the organization that most of them are using, is willing to say, hey, you're not willing to sign and agree to this, we can't support you. And all those state agencies and districts are saying, yeah, we're gonna have to end our contract with you unless you're willing to do this. So that provides a lot more legal leverage. So, recently I was in a meeting with Tech's lawyers about a specific vendor who had pushed back about a clause, and they're like, we're not gonna budge on this. We know they're gonna move, but it might take a little while. So it's making Colorado and Illinois a little nervous because their contract was coming up sooner on it. So, having that leverage, you just can't pull that off on them.
So kind of similar to I want to make sure I get everyone's feedback on what I rate that other states are contemplating or doing as well, which is banning ed tech or a significant amount of screen time at all for kids under a certain age. Maybe you have thoughts on really appropriate uses of ed tech for kindergarten versus second grade. And that could be subjective, obviously. And then two, we're getting the kind of anecdotal, there was a pop-up ad for vapes or whatever. That just shouldn't happen, right?
Right.
And the more they're tied to your system or your agreement, we should not have any paid advertising to kids on any device. Period.
And a lot of our schools would filter it out through those advertising networks, so they won't push through. But again, there's teachers who may turn to a tool that has no student data right? Maybe it's an interactive science simulation or whatever it is. They
Mhm.
pull it in for that one activity.
Mhm.
That can go through a DPA agreement. The students don't have logins to the system. It doesn't have, right? So that's why that privacy really needs to be separated from that educational effectiveness. Because
Right.
it's a different class. It's still EdTech, right?
Yeah,
And so that's still a concern, but just isn't that privacy structure doesn't cover it. And I think what we want to ensure is that people have a high quality curriculum. So they're not glomming on to resources everywhere
Mhm.
because they don't have good instructional
Mhm.
materials, right? And so that's where we need to kind of start as a baseline.
and so the tools you have through the agreement as offerings wouldn't have a pop-up, even if it.
They can't have it.
There's no
There's no
advertising.
advertising. They can't,
No advertising.
right. There
Right.
can't be student data tracking and they can't sell that data either.
Mhm.
And it goes down to their subcontractors.
Yeah.
Because they store their stuff on Amazon cloud. They use, a Microsoft database on the back end. So they have to have all those subcontractors sign those same DPA agreements.
Right.
Down the chain because otherwise it's gonna violate.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
So let's say this was a scenario, I don't know the details, but
Right.
this is what we heard about this bill. There was a scenario where a student in middle school was using a school Chromebook and they got an ad for a vape cartridge. Would that be because they're on the internet somewhere they shouldn't be? Would a parent make a complaint to the school? Would the student even say like, oh, that's not cool or something? And like, how do they try and limit
Yeah.
that experience?
Yeah, so that's on the internet. That's
Right.
not coming from some app, right? So that comes down to the internet filter that the schools are putting in place. And every district has internet filter that's in our tech survey that they, right, to make sure that that's complied with and everyone's got it.
Is it like McAfee or whatever that one's called? Like,
Because that's like a personal security. This is like
Okay.
on your network. So if you go in with your
Yeah.
own, laptop and you hook to the wireless in the school, you should be routed through that filter as well.
Mhm.
Right? So anyone's coming in the
Okay.
Right. But the thing with the internet's fast. So
Yeah.
so what they're doing is they're selecting categories of
Right.
sites to say, okay, no porn, no illicit drug use, or no violence. So they're picking these categories and they're subscribing effectively to these lists that are built and maintained.
And
Those
we
categories.
try to look at those filters as a state to make sure they're not filtering out like kids understanding their sexuality or
Yeah, so
LGBTQ, that
I
it's not like book banning.
So every IT department deals with getting requests from teachers like, hey, I wanted this site and we're all blocked from it.
Mhm.
Why is this being blocked? And then they're
And then
sorted
they
through
can
that.
change, change that, or they can block a site.
Yeah, and there's ones that are challenges. Like
Yeah.
they're generally- like Wikipedia.
Right,
95% of Wikipedia is great,
right.
but maybe in elementary school that there's the little corners of Wikipedia that people are more nervous about. So those types of ones get debated a bit,
Interesting.
right?
So Herman,
So you said your two requirements, which,
No, go.
Sure.
Go.
currently some districts do not go through what you're saying here.
So we have contracts coming, I can see active contracts in the past, I think it went back 2 years
Mhm.
from 44 districts and supervisory meetings. That's almost everyone, right? And it could be those others just aren't signing contracts recently, but that's all I can, the problem is the way that database
And
is
if-
set up, it's a little funky.
All right, so if we enacted this and say, oh, now the district would say, oh, hey, we'd like this app. They would have to call up to the AOE and say,
No.
no.
So what they literally are able to do through that privacy alliance is if any other district in Vermont has signed a contract with that vendor, they're effectively just piggyback.
Okay.
They can just be like, check.
Now what
Right.
happens if I find one nobody else has?
Then that's where that either they're talking to the vendor or if they pay that dollar per student towards tech, their lawyers are going to negotiate that. And what tech is doing effectively is there are about 14 states that are using tech. So often it's like, well, Colorado has signed and it's easy for them to piggyback Vermont, right? There is a space in the way that Student Data Privacy Consortium thing is written for states to add extra clauses effectively. So for instance, New York has a clause around criminal background checks. Since we're in there, a lot of our stuff is coming. So let's say you New York. I want to make sure I get this one right. I think it's New York has this one. So it's a criminal background check. So let's say you had an app where the students could call in for tech support. Does that tech support person on the phone have a criminal background check on it? So that's actually a requirement of their state law. They've added to their contracts. And then of course we've added kind of feedback, but it's not actually in our contracts.
And you said roughly, so $83,000 a year it costs Vermont to piggyback onto. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're up. It's like I think it's 40 districts are paying for tech services now, so it's the vast majority.
And then you say 10.
Oh, sorry, the Education Cooperative, the as one of the initiatives, which throws me off.
Senator Weeks.
So first, we apologize, in committee when folks start to give testimony and they read, they tend to kind of fade back. So, but I think I caught your point. I want to summarize it. You tell me if I missed it or if I got it. So there's a system already in place that could be used. It's found to be effective, but it's not universal, correct, across the state. I didn't hear a potential funding request, but given the minimal amount of money that it's necessary to exercise the program, it's it could be effective. It could solve most of the problems.
Correct.
Okay. Now
That's on the privacy.
That's on the privacy side.
on privacy on it.
Yeah, I'm hoping we kind of think of them separately because I think conflating of this causing.
Okay, that's fair. That's where I'm trying to. And then since we have the sponsor in the room, I figure with that said, with what AOE has just offered, is there more in that section of the bill that is necessary to survive for any particular reason, given that AOE has an effective, at least has access to an effective program that seems to exercise largely what I think was your angle.
So Angela Arsenault from representative from Williston, co-sponsor of the bill. We are of course aware of the Student Data Privacy Consortium and feel pretty strongly that it is not enough. It's not at all touching on efficacy of the products and other types of safety concerns that aren't addressed through data privacy. So nothing in the data privacy agreements can really get to the simple existence of the products in the classroom and what the types of doors that opens up for predators and other folks reaching students on school issued devices. It just it's through no fault of anyone who's trying to do the good work. It's just too easy to get past district firewalls and things like that. Students are being approached by predators and drug sellers and they just all on school issued devices.
Okay, but thank you. And now that we actually have this moment where you're both in the same room, can you respond to what her motion was?
Yeah, I think the concern is on what's on the internet and access to the internet versus educational technology that the district has contracted with, right? And so those are, right? So the district can only cover with those DPAs, right? Those are the software products. They've said this is exactly we want to use.
Yeah.
But if a student goes to a website, right, then that's really the only stop there is the internet filters that the school has put in place. And those filters are always going to be a little bit of a rough hammer, right? Because it's like, let's take for instance, email. If you want the students to have email, you're either giving them email or you're not giving them email. You can't block Gmail and then expect you can't choose from that internet filter what piece of the site is blocked. That's why Wikipedia was a challenge, right, for schools. And a number of them have blocked Wikipedia because they can't pick and choose amongst Wikipedia articles. It's just not that fine grain of control. But
To follow up.
No, I was just curious.
Okay,
It's a unique opportunity to have folks in rooms.
and that, since let's just go back and forth once more, your response.
I totally agree that the filters can't get down to that, can't protect every kid from everything. And I think to crudely paraphrase what you might be saying, Josh, absolutely agree with that. And that's part of the reason that we're saying, let's take a look at the presence of these products in the classroom at all. That's one of the considerations in what we're asking the AOE to look at is the benefits of using some of the such certain products at certain grade levels over an analog. And so there won't be an analog version for every EdTech product, understanding that completely. But when you think about, does a young person, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, even fourth grade, do they need to be reading a book on a computer, or could they be reading a book in their hands on paper? Those sorts of considerations are what we're trying to get at as well with this bill, that it's a much wider lens than just the data privacy piece.
Senator Arundel, then Senator Williams.
So I know I'm going to take a look at what Utah just passed, because I feel like there's a certain age at which we can agree there's not a lot of educational value for devices. And then there's probably another age band where we don't want them on the internet unless they're in a supervised kind of library research setting, learning how to use research tools that have an online component. But I maybe I'm too old now, but there's still really good research tools on a device that aren't connected to the internet. And what I worry about is that I don't really want to learn and know who all of these organizations are. I just want to say we're following some best practices here, that kids aren't just on the internet in 4th, 5th grade. That's not a good idea from my perspective. And then by middle school, we're teaching them digital literacy and some responsible use. But I think what we're seeing are other states saying, I don't want to wait for all of this to just be out there. I think anything on the internet could be harmful to our kids. And there are probably a lot of reasons to limit their use of the internet during school hours.
You gotta agree with that, because once they go home, it's the Wild West.
You've got to agree
So
with that or
I
disagree.
agree with you, but at school, yes, because maybe we should just get rid of the internet. But then it's hard. A lot of people use it as a learning tool. But as far as trying to get rid of everything that we want to get rid of, as soon as they leave school, they're opened up to it. And all we're trying to say is, while you're in school,
Okay, but
it's
a
not
lot
gonna
of
happen.
parents are making decisions based on research and best practice about, you can have a device with me, you can have a device that connects to the internet or not, all of those things. And I think they would be concerned to learn that their kid is just connected to the internet in
So
some of these
there's a
ways.
little resurgence in landlines for that reason.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Flip phones are coming back.
But all we can really do is what this bill can do is why they're at school. That's all.
Right, and this bill doesn't do anything while they're at school. This bill says, let's look at what's out there. I'm trying to make sure that if you are trying to lead a best practice, you have some parameters right now that are generally saying to schools, we're not a passive feedback of this is good, this isn't good, but we're starting to work with you on the research that there should only be limited settings where they're on the internet and supervised, and they shouldn't just be sitting with no one behind their screen on the internet in some of these grades, right? You all believe that. So then can't that be just made into a better guidance for what we do and do not do with ed tech in our schools?
Definitely.
I'm gonna speaker soaks this a little bit, right? We do need to be careful as we approach that.
We wouldn't reference them.
So I'm gonna be very specific.
Yeah, yeah.
Where we do need to be careful about exceptions for tools and resources that students with disabilities
Sure,
might need.
absolutely. And then
Overall,
can you make those exceptions?
So-
Yeah.
I'm gonna end this conversation after Senator Williams, but by saying, can you give us, not the word, but just give us draft language so we can pull up against this and have a
Yeah.
discussion.
Like, what is your
If you've
guidance
got
right now?
draft language for the bill, let us know what it is. And we'll just hold it up against it, makes it, but Senator Williams, you waiting.
I just want to back up a little bit and ask Representative Archibald a question about the bill, so I haven't read it. And, my biggest concern is that somebody's checking the basic competency level of the students before they're allowed to use this stuff. In other words, kiddos are pretty ingenious about using devices to get by when they don't have basic competency in STEM. And I want to make sure they know how to do their math and do their, their reading competency, because they can use, if they can get the AI, they can get AI to do it for them. So I guess my question is that, is there any provision in the bill that would require AOE to make sure that there was a curriculum for how to use this technology? If you've got, I equate it to having somebody walking through a minefield. They doesn't have a designated path, and kids can get hurt without that path. So we need to make sure that they have their basic arithmetic, reading skills down before they get to use it, because they're gonna bypass it if they don't have it. How do we start at that one?
So I would say that the bill certainly, the intent of the bill is to hear from the AOE on those sorts of concerns. Sort of, absolutely, that especially with the advent of AI and the ease of cognitive offloading, I have read the AOE guidance on AI in education, and I'll point out that guidance and other types of guidance buried within that or embedded in that is the presumption of use. We need to be examining whether or not, again, it's grade level specific, it's ability specific. I don't mean to gloss over the nuance here, but we are asking the agency to tell the legislature what it would take to establish state standards so that we can know what products are being let into schools. We can know that the products at a minimum are legal, safe, and effective to be used in education. That's really what the bill does.
Can I just say one thing? I think people should read the kids code and should wait for their response to the kids code, because the important thing was designing for the future, was saying we have to have parameters that work into the future, not let's be retroactively looking at what exists and how bad it is, because they're just going to come up with the next thing. So if we need a kids code for ed tech, great, but it should have principles, no ads. This is appropriate for this age. This is not appropriate for this age. I'm worried about a potential time suck of trying to find all the ed tech companies, and I just don't know exactly what that does for us.
So if you can do that for us, provide us with language that you think will be what you're advocating, so we can hold it up against this and make some decisions. That would be helpful. Okay. Thank you. So next we have, I don't know if it's separate or together, but Walter Ripley and Peter Greffer. Wrong. Board President, Learn. So you have to both introduce yourselves for the record and actually tell us what Vita Learn is.
Sure, that's a good starting point always. So my name is Walter Ripley. I'm the Data Assessment Tech Coordinator for Slate Valley and also the current Board President for VitaLearn. Essentially, we're a nonprofit that operates in the state of Vermont that consists largely of the ed tech folks from all the school districts around, and trying to help ensure effective and safe use of education technology in the schools in Vermont.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Drescher. I am the Director of Technology and Innovation at Essex Westford School District. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Vital Learn Board.
So the floor is yours, whichever order you want to do it in.
I think we're tag teaming it, so we can
Okay,
kind of
that's
go back
fine.
and forth a little bit. And I will just start off by saying, I think, having listened to Josh's testimony from the AOE, I think we find several parts of our written testimony sort of duplicative. So I don't know if we really want to take the time to fully read through that as much as I think listening to the discussion today, I would just maybe try to bring it back to the conversation that the AOE was proposing, that initially we were talking about this as a consumer protection bill. And I think as part of that aspect of it, using the education collaborative tech, as Josh was using the terms that we're all familiar with it, I think trying to bring that, to have that as a resource everybody can access in the state is certainly something as an organization we see the value of, because that's a tool that leverages agreements across multiple states. And for example, if you look at New York, they've directly partnered with the Department of Education for the state of New York to create that framework of what data privacy looks like in the schools for that state and those kind of things. So I think that's a really key starting part to it. Part of our concern, I would say, when this first came about was around the idea of certification happening at the state level. Not so much that we don't trust the AOE's ability by any stretch, but rather just recognizing ed tech is evolving and is a constantly, new things are coming out, people are exploring. So I think we were concerned about the time frame and the capacity of that work to be able to be done in a time frame that was realistic and plausible and allowed schools to try to be innovative. So I think that's kind of where we were coming with the perspective today. I will say, kind of on behalf of the organization, what the AOE's testimony proposes, we would be all in favor of, and I think would be a great first step. And it recognizes a lot of the work that's already happening in our Vermont school system and creates that formal process that we all know, hey, when we talk about the vetting of ed tech software as a Vermont system of education, this is what it entails, this is what it looks like. And so I think that would be a huge step forward on everything.
I would agree wholeheartedly with Walter and with Josh, what he had proposed in his testimony. I think that would be very beneficial to the school districts. And I don't think it would be, I was actually encouraged by maybe, I believe, Senator Heffernan saying that, it doesn't seem like a big leap to go from 44 to all of the districts kind of following this model and working towards it. It works very well for us, especially in the piggyback model that Josh outlined, wherein a district can begin a process, and then other districts can follow suit on the same parameters. So that's very helpful. I wanted to go to listening to the conversation in the room. I wanted to go to something that I think is important that we might be missing out here is the teachers in the room. And I worry a little bit that some of the conversation that just transpired was that, that we put devices in front of students and, it's willy-nilly and they can do whatever they want. I think we try very hard at Essex Westford to have a robust and strong filtering system. We work on that all the time to make sure that it works correctly the way it should. We also try to empower our teachers in understanding, that they don't have to use technology all the time and that there are appropriate times for it. We have moved towards younger students using technology less and less just because they've asked about that. The teachers have. So I think we need to put it a little bit in the classroom and let those professionals make some of those decisions. I think that's really important that we weren't really talking about in that particular exchange. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think many things have been said already that were in the testimony that we put forward from Vital Learn. I don't know if it's appropriate to maybe just answer some questions you might have or to dive deeper on some of the other points that have been made. Would that be appropriate?
So just so I understand it, am I understanding your testimony to say that you basically on the same page as the agency?
Was the
Yes, here,
testimony-
we submitted some written testimony that, yes, has some things that mirror that, yes, but yes, I can say that, you know, reading and reviewing Josh's testimony, I mean, Walter is in agreement, I believe, that, you know, we're behind what, Mr. Bloomberg had put forth, so, yes.
Okay. Questions?
You know, and I think I would just conclude by saying from our side, a lot of the conversations you folks were having today are certainly ones that in the school system we're having on a daily basis as well. You know, it's a constant system of looking at what's working well in ed tech, what isn't, and trying to refine those processes and recognizing that, you know, things do change and you think something is going to be a good solution. And then on reflection, you realize, that didn't quite go as planned. So, you know, it's a worthwhile topic, and I would say I'm excited to see that happening not only at the school level but at the legislative level as well. So I would commend everybody for bringing this topic up.
Yeah, I mean, we I would say not regularly, but we often abandon software or products that we believe to have had, you know, we believe they were a solution to something we had been trying to solve, and we often will abandon those when we see that they are not effective. So we do, you know, lean on our teachers for that.
We are, Representative, Scott May of London is going to send us, I'm sure, a list of additional witnesses.
You got it.
And you want to testify, we'll have you in to testify as well. But good next step on our understanding of this bill today. And we'll take it up, like, it's probably relatively next week, right? Oh, we have some time this week, okay. So maybe a couple more witnesses this week to get this thing moving. This is on our list of bills that we want to get out of here. We'll run. So we actually have a few minutes. So why don't we take a break until we have next we're switching back to the follow-up bill. We have former superintendent testifying about that voucher process at 3:15. I think she has limited time, so make sure that we're back after a couple minutes before we can actually start at 15. So we can go off.